um, unless you're Isabelle or Professor Rana or me. So kindly switch off, please, your cameras and mics. This session will be recorded, and we will start now. Dr. Seuss says, the more that you read, the more things you will know. The more that you learn, the more places you will go. In the celebration of National Reading Month, Department of Culture and Tourism of Abu Dhabi and Abu Dhabi Libraries present this amazing session with my two very dearest guests, and I insist on presenting them with almost their full biography. So bear with me. This morning, we're having Isabelle Abulhoul, Emirates Literature Foundation CEO. Isabelle came to Dubai in 1968. She co-founded Magrudi's bookshop chain in 1975, which is still thriving and has 8 bookshops across the UAE. In 2008, Isabelle founded the Emirates Airline Festival of Literature, the Middle East's largest celebration of the written and spoken word. In 2013, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President and Prime Minister of the UAE and ruler of Dubai, and also the festival patron, issued a decree establishing the Emirates Literature Foundation, naming Isabelle as one of the trustees on the board and holds the position of CEO. She is also a trustee of the International Prize for Arabic Fiction Board, Secretary General of the Kalimat Foundation, and Director of the Board for the Mohammed bin Rashid Library. In addition, Isabelle has been elected to Supreme National Committee for Tolerance and has been selected as member of the Police Advisory Council for Community Service. Isabelle has reviewed several awards over the years, such as Cultural Personality of the Year by Dr. His Highness Sheikh Sultan bin Mohammed Al Qasimi, the ruler of Sharjah in 2010. Prestigious OBE Award by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth of Great Britain in 2012, Isabelle's passion and drive for education and literature remains as strong as ever. Our second guest is Professor Rana Dajani. She's a professor of molecular cell biology from Hashemiyat University, Jordan, Harvard Radcliffe Fellow, a Fulbrighter, Eisenhower Fellow, Yale and Cambridge visiting professor. World expert on genetics of Circassian and Chechen population in Jordan. Established stem cell research ethics law in Jordan. Advocate for biological evolution and Islam. Researches refugee youth and the epigenetics of trauma across generations. Member UN Women Jordan Advisory Council, established a Women Mentor Network, received Partnerships for Enhanced Engagement and Research Award in 2014. Organized the first Gender Summit for the Arab world in 2017, most influential women scientists in Islamic world, 12 among 100 most influential Arab women, Global Change Maker Award for celebrating President of the Society for Advancement of Science, Technology, and the list goes on. She's the author of the book 5 Scars, Doing the Impossible. Now, ladies, again, happy International Women's Day.
Thank you.
Happy to have you, honored to have you. And today, if you allow me to start with Isabelle, starting Al Magrudi's in the 70s up until now, you had a great impact on several generations of Emirates locals and residents back then until now. One of them was me. So I really want to thank you personally for this amazing experience. I wouldn't have been an author, an Emirati author today if it was not for Magrudi's. And I insist on saying that for the first time for you. And I want you to share with us, why should children read? Let's start with this question.
Thank you so much. for all your wonderful words, Iman, and what an honour it is to be on the same panel as Professor Rana. So, and on International Women's Day. So why is it important that children read? So I was very fortunate. I grew up in a house where my parents were avid readers. In those days, there was no TV, there were no mobile phones, there was no internet. So it was probably easier than it is today. I do recognise that, but it is still very possible to give your children the priceless gift of reading for pleasure. I say reading for pleasure. So anything that we want to encourage, it's no good saying to someone, run 5 miles, unless they find that pleasurable. So we need to be very careful that we set a good example at home by having books, by having a home library, by having a special shelf. I always have a special shelf for I've got now 7 grandchildren, I've got 5 children of my own. I feel blessed that they're all avid readers, apart from the baby who is only 2 months old, but she already has time with books, with her mother and with me and other family members. It's never too early to start reading to your children, sharing stories. As human beings, we have an absolute need inside us, in our souls, for stories. You know, since the beginning of time, stories have been very important. Oral storytelling, drawing pictures in caves, wherever you look, passing myth down generations. It has always been there, and we mustn't lose sight of it. So for me, reading started for me when I was a baby, and my parents read to me every day. So my mother would read in the day, and I sat by our front door in Cambridge. I'm originally from Cambridge, waiting for my father to come home. He used to get home from work at 6 p.m. and our bedtime was 6:10. So we went to bed very early and we woke up very early. That was the habit. All right. So his duty, once he'd washed his hands, was to get into bed with me and read me and my brother stories. That was our bedtime treat, and I would never let him not do it. Not that he always wanted to do it. So bedtime story time is a really good way with your children to encourage them to read, just because it's a beautiful time for winding down. And I would often say to each of my children, you choose a book. So they would choose a book and we would focus on that. Then I would choose a book, because I love children's books, and it's having those special moments of reading a book that you enjoy. And children also, young children, love the same story time and again. You don't buy a book and it's finished when you've read it. They love knowing what comes next. And with picture books, you have both words and illustrations. And the illustrations are an integral part of the story. So when you're reading a children's book, I've got a little one here called Mr. Seahorse. The illustrations are as important as the words, and you need to take time and you need to have a conversation when you're reading to young children. This has got an amazing sort of bit in it which children love, because you can see through a panel. This was a book that I read as a child. It was published in 1888, so it's about 150 years old. Little Lord Fauntleroy. If we gave that to children today, believe you me, I doubt whether they would want to read it, because it looks so old-fashioned. The text is very old-fashioned. But I treasure that because I have happy memories. And it was obviously belonged to either my mother's or father's family, and it was always there for us in our childhood. So making sure that you treasure books in your home, that you do not get rid of children's books when they're too old, because inshallah there will be another generation of children to come. Why is it so important to read? To come back to Iman's question, because research over the last 50 years around the world has shown that children who read regularly for pleasure, and the reading regularly for pleasure starts from when they're born with their parents, do better at school, do better in their university life across all subjects, not just literature and language, but science and maths and geography and history. All of us need literacy at a high level to do well and in their future careers. And of course, if they read for pleasure, the next cycle will be when they have children, they read to their children for pleasure. That's what I did, and that's what my children do because they had that experience. So it starts at home, and it is a habit of a daily habit and a habit of a lifetime. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. It sure did. Before I move on to Professor Rana, I have a really must ask question at this point. With your grandchildren's, I want that personal experience. How did you, I don't want to say defeat, but a lot of people see a lot of conflict nowadays between the children books, as interesting as they can be, with all the pictures and the colors, and the phones or the games or the TV. And I know that a lot of children, they start really early from the first months of their life playing those games or watching those cartoons. So how is this going around the idea of having the habit of reading for a child or with the child being attached to those books?
Okay, so first of all, we have a television, but we don't put it on at all regularly. The children can have a short time of selection at the end of the day before we go up to bed, because so you have to limit devices. We wouldn't say to children eat 50 chocolate bars or eat 3 tubs of ice cream, because we know it's not good for them. And children under 2 should not have access to electronic devices, not mobile phones, not iPads. It's their brain is developing and they do not need that. What they need is to sit on your knee, to get your arms around them and pick up a book and say, oh, shall we read this then? And believe you me, they come to me, my grandchildren pick books off the shelf and they bring them, and no matter what I'm doing, I will stop what I'm doing to have that special moment with them. So it's in our power as parents and carers to limit, as we would anything. We would not send a child out on the road and say, just, walk up the road on your own. So we have to deal with television and electronic devices. We have to put limits on how much they have or what they have at all. And certainly for us, my older grandchildren now are using iPads at school. I limit those at the weekend. I put them in a cupboard, and it's a game for them to find where they actually are. Because once you take them off that, they then return to being children again and doing things you want to do with children. Whether it's playing chess, whether it's playing snakes and ladders, going on a hunt in the garden to look for insects. So we are responsible for what we allow our children to do, and we're responsible for making sure reading is top of the list. Reading to your children, grandchildren, nephews, nieces every day.
I second that. I mean, I grew up in a house, unfortunately, with no library, but my parents used to tell me stories. We had the before bedtime storytelling, and this thing just stuck in my mind. And later on, I started reading. I built on my own library, but it went on and on as a very, very treasured memory, and it's part of who I am. Professor Rana, we wanted to talk about changing mindsets, but before we do that, I want to hear all about Wheel of Reading from you. But let me first thank you for joining us today. I believe you are joining us from the US, and it's really late at night. I don't know what time is it around.
It's 2 a.m., but that's okay. It's worth it.
We really highly appreciate that and cherish it. We're so lucky to have you, and we're sorry. We're really sorry
it's
for
okay.
that.
I'm from Georgia. I'm from the Arab world. This is who we are. It doesn't matter wherever we are.
I mean, this is a great example for all women around the world on Women's Day. So I really cherish that. And okay, so we love reading. Uh, can I just walk us through a little bit about what is We Love Reading? And then I have a lot of questions for you.
Great. So I have a few slides I'd like to share because sometimes pictures are very powerful. So I'm going to share my screen, but then I don't know if I can actually see people as I share it. So if you want to interrupt me at any point with a question or a comment, please do so by speaking up. But thank you for inviting me to be here today. Let's see. Oops. There we go. And I couldn't. I mean, what Isabelle was saying was music to my ears about the how she described the love of reading and the importance of reading. So, can you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Great. All right. So first of all, I'm going to highlight 2 points. You described me in your introduction as a scientist, and some people are going to wonder, so what does a scientist who does molecular cell biology have to do with reading and reading for pleasure? So that's part of what I'm going to answer. As well as how can we take what Isabelle said practically and do something in our own community. So that's how I'm going to approach this. And I'm going to share a story because I think, in the past, there were like 2 groups of people as we evolved as a species. There was a group of people who sat around the fire and told stories. And there was another group who frowned upon them and said, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. But I think all of us can imagine which group is the one that survived. It was obviously the storytellers because it's so essential to our survival. And so in that spirit, I'm going to share the story and briefly talk about how I went from the scientist to the social entrepreneur who created We Love Reading. And I think I'd like to say that I think the most important role any person can play in society is taking care of their children. And so I like to introduce myself by saying I'm a mother to start with, because nobody can replace me in that role, while in my other roles, I can be replaced. The second most important role I think we can play is being teachers and educators, because our children, if they're not at home with their parents, they are in school with the teachers. So my hat off with all respect to all teachers. My third kind of role is being a scientist. Like Iman mentioned, I work on epigenetics of trauma, and I work on the ethnic minorities, Circassians and Chechens, which led us to develop the stem cell law. But fourthly, which is the We Love Reading program that I started, changing mindsets through reading to create change makers. But those who are curious, I always talk about a fifth role I play, which I'm not going to tell you what it is to leave some anticipation, and invite you to read my book, Five Scarves, Doing the Impossible. If we can reverse cell fate, why can't we redefine success? So please read it and tell me what you think. But what I want to say about, when you change cultures or you change countries, you come back to your country and you see things that you appreciate and you see things that you think should be done better. And that's when I realized that children, not just in Jordan and the Arab world, but actually all over the world, even in developed countries, don't read for fun. They may read for other reasons, like for education or for religion, but not for fun. And Isabelle so eloquently described the importance of reading for fun, whether it's increasing your vocabulary or your imagination, or becoming more empathetic by understanding where people are coming from, reading about them. But most importantly, I think you become the hero you read about, and you gain the confidence and the courage to make a difference in your community. And so the question became to me, how do you help children fall in love with reading? And as Isabelle said, it's all about having a role model, a caregiver, a parent who reads aloud as early as when the mother is even pregnant. Because what happens is that the neurons in the brain, as they make connections, there becomes an association in the brain of the child between reading for fun and feeling secure and happy in their mother's or father's lap, or as Isabelle described, when her father was reading to her, that stays with us when we grow older. And so we want to read when we're happy, when we're sad, because it gives us this good feeling. So from this premise, I thought, I know the solution, to help children fall in love with reading. Somebody has to read aloud to them. But I thought, so if you pass a law, does that mean people are going to follow the law? Obviously, we know they're not necessarily. Am I going to knock on every parent's door and ask them to read aloud? That's not possible. And so I thought, taking from Prophet Muhammad saying that everyone is a protector and a guardian, and being the change, as Gandhi said, I thought I'm going to gather the children and read aloud to them in my local mosque in my neighborhood. And that's what happened. And what happened is, after I read aloud to the children, they line up and take the books home. And then they become the champions of reading at home by begging their parents to read to them, or they read aloud to their siblings and friends. And as Isabel said, you don't need a lot of books. A child loves to hear the same story again and again. And this was how We Love Reading started in 2006, where we train youth and adults, men and women, from age 16 to 100 years old, how to read aloud as an art in their native language. That's very important, so that the child falls in love with reading. Books from their everyday life, on a regular basis in a public space. I did it in the mosque, but we have others doing it in churches, community centers, under trees, wherever they want. Most importantly, and then we created an organization as an umbrella for the program called Taghyir, which in Arabic means change. Now, this training program that we developed then, it trains two things: how to read aloud as an art, because most people did not grow up being read to, and how to start a reading circle in their neighborhood, which we call the Wheel of Reading Library, which to us is an experience rather than a physical space. And as these women and men start creating their reading aloud sessions and in their neighborhood, they become, in their own right, social entrepreneurs and leaders, because they have discovered their voice both figuratively and literally, because many of them are women. And so they go through this journey of attending the training, hosting the first reading, starting a library, and then establishing a long-term library that for many has gone on for years. And by the way, these are volunteers. And we tell them to pay it forward, to tell others about the program. And now everybody knows about the program, they have to pay it forward as well. And that's how We Love Reading has spread to actually 62 countries today. Yesterday, somebody from Nigeria called us up. And again, in every continent now, we have somebody who is doing reading aloud in their native tongue. And therefore, We Love Reading has been called a social movement, because it calls upon people who share values, universal values, to work together to make a difference. And the reason it has spread is because it's so simple, it's affordable, doesn't cost anything, just a few books, and it's flexible because everyone tailors it to fit their own community's needs. Most importantly, because I'm a scientist, we did research to show the impact of We Love Reading and to learn how we can develop it better. And this is very important to bridge research and practice. And all the things that Isabelle mentioned, we have supported with research on the ground. So for example, for the children, we have shown with Brown University how reading aloud through the We Love Reading program improves all three executive functions, which are working memory, inhibitory control, and emotional regulation, which makes children do much better at school. And we showed that the effects of this are largest for children coming from lower family socioeconomic status. So in this way, you can actually bridge the gap that the UN wants to do between families coming from lower income to achieve the same things as those are coming from higher income. But we also saw that we could actually change children's behavior by reading books on particular themes, for example, about the environment. And so here we developed books about energy and water conservation, anti-littering, and we showed we could change the children's behavior just by reading aloud stories for 3 months. And also we were able to show with the University of Chicago that empathy increased 100-fold just by reading aloud stories on a regular basis. Willingness to school also increased. And we even showed with Queen Mary University that children who were exposed to trauma, such as refugees, their emotional categorization changes. They identify happy faces more with sad faces. But after 3 months of We Love Reading, they were able to change that. And I'm going to share the last piece of evidence, which is not research we've done, but by someone else from University of Cincinnati, Dr. John Hutton, where he showed that if you show images on a video or a screen, you activate all parts of your brain in a very random way. They're all wildly firing, just like the Goldilocks example where the porridge was too hot. And if you just show them something auditory, like audible, this firing of the brain is only one particular area, so it's a little bit too cold. But when you're reading aloud a book where you have the audible, the auditory sensation, but you also have the human interaction, then the certain parts of the brain are fired in coordination. So it's just right, because the brain is like a muscle that's developing, and the images with the auditory sensation brings those images to life in the minds of the children. And lastly, we have followed our children. So Layan is one of the children we started reading to in 2006. Today she's at the university, and a testimonial to the impact of reading aloud when young on the children's achievement. And lastly, also about the parent-child interaction. That is affected. As Isabelle very nicely described, the relationship between her and her father, and then her and her children, and her and her grandchildren. And so this is something we've been studying with NYU, and we've just released a study from Lund University showing the impact of the fathers reading to their children. Well, we're always in our mind, we're thinking about mothers reading aloud, but also fathers do that with incredible success. And again, the impact on the adult or the youth who's reading aloud. So it's not just an equation of the child benefiting, but the parent or the adult is benefiting. And this was something we never aimed at. It happened very naturally when I was with somebody from UNESCO, and I was describing our program, and they told me, "But Rana, your program is not just about the children; it's about the adults as a lifelong learning program." And we found where adults with disabilities, auditory challenges, or even visual challenges, were able to gather the children, read aloud to them, and therefore targeting all sectors of the community. And so the community now has a attitude of I can, rather than being a victim and waiting for somebody to save them or blaming governments or authorities. They take matters into their own hands and start creating their own libraries and solving their own problems. And we've also developed a whole series of books, not just the environment ones I mentioned, but those about refugees, about gender, about disabilities, about social inclusion, and so on, to enrich the Arabic literature, which is we need to a lot more. And so as we have scaled, we've scaled in a disproportionate way, where we reach out to others to take the program and roll it out, because we believe in impact. You want to be out of business. We collaborate with other partners, and then we want the community to take it up as a social movement. I'm going to just pause here, just show that we have our trainings. We have a digital management system to contact all our Wheel of Reading ambassadors around the world. And we do this through a mobile app, connecting to them. And with COVID-19, this has kind of posed a challenge, but we saw it as a silver lining, because what we did is we moved all our training online. Now the training is online in 10 languages. And so it's become a placeholder for education when children are out of school, or children who don't have access to digital tools. The parents can take the training once, and then they can start reading aloud to their children. So it helps their early childhood reading and learning, but also it reduces mental health stress and boosts resilience, and creating a network of ambassadors on the ground. And so we are innovative because we have the secret sauce to allow people to discover their own agency, to solve their own problems, and therefore changing in a universal value system that anybody can access and use. And we use technology, as Isabelle said, not to read aloud books from a digital platform, but to read real books. And we use the digital technology to connect the ambassadors around the world. We've won multiple awards, and we've partnered with many people, and we've been showcased in a lot of like the Stanford Social Innovation, New York Times, Forbes, and others. So I'll stop here for any questions, and I'll end with, we call this the butterfly effect, right? It's when a butterfly metamorphoses from a caterpillar, and then when the butterfly flutters its wings, it moves the wind 1 centimeter, and that results in a hurricane somewhere in some place. And this is the fundamental impact of the chaos theory, and that's why every person who reads aloud is kind of like the butterfly. And you can read more about it in our new book, We Love Reading, an Introduction. I'll stop here for questions or comments and follow-up. Thank you.
Professor, that was amazing, amazing. Now, this was also a music to our ears, and I salute you for this nourishing and nurturing and this addition. Kindly, for everyone who's watching us right now, except for those two guests, please switch off your cameras and mics. And kindly also just tell us in the chat if you follow us outside of the UAE, which country or city are you following us from? Professor Rana, I need to ask you this question, and then I will also ask the same question to Isabelle. Now, you established We Love Reading, and you came across dealing a lot with adults and with children benefiting from this content. And I can see some of the covers that you had in the slides, and a lot of them are from within the Arabic content for children books. Do you see any missing points, any points that needs to be developed? What kind of work is missing still when we talk about the Arabic content addressed for children?
We can never have enough. That's first of all, right? The more books we have, the better it is. So there will never be enough. But maybe to start with, what are the priorities, right? So we need more children's books about that encourage curiosity and critical thinking, and for a child to think outside the box. So that's one category, and also we need more books that are not educational, are not like in your face, do this or don't do that. We want the stories that celebrate the children in their multiple diversity, right? And lastly, stories from real life. You know, the child that runs away, the child that picks their nose, and so that the children can see themselves in the book, and then realize that that's okay. We can get through this and come out on the other side. So I think those are three categories that we need to focus on, and develop the talent from in youth, in adults, in writing those kinds of books to engage the children and foster their curiosity and their critical thinking.
Thank you, Professor. I'm getting back to you also regarding the Fulbrighter thingy, because I'm a Fulbrighter right now and I definitely need to ask you about that too. But moving back to Isabelle and with the same question. Now, Isabelle, you can tell us a lot since you are a CEO and you started the Emirates Literature Foundation and Festival, and then you started Magrudi's years ago. So you've been in touch with parents and children, both in English and Arabic content. So where do you see we can develop? What do we still need to work on in this field?
First of all, I'd like to thank Professor Rana for the amazing job she's doing. It is, mashallah alayk, you are music to my whole ethos of what I believe in, because I believe that this is one of the most important things we can do, is to give our children a love of reading. If we give them that, they will fly like butterflies, they will fly like falcons, whatever they're going to fly, because they have this innate ability. They can read anything, you know, and reading doesn't stop just with books. You've got recipes. Sometimes we write recipes with my grandchildren. They want to cook something, so they have to write the ingredients, they have to read it, they have to get that from the cooking cupboard. You know, cornflakes packets, wherever you look, there are words, street names, and so on. So I think what we need to help them is to get the urge to learn to read, because learning to read is a different thing than reading for pleasure. It's more of a mechanical thing. So we have to overcome that. But the more that you read to your children at home, the more they overcome the sort of that process, because they start to learn words themselves. They start to, because of the familiarity of the books. And I think things that Professor Rana, I would like to echo, empathy. So one of the key things with picture books in particular, it starts very early, is empathy. So feeling for someone else, understanding when someone else is sad, and understanding why. The ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes is really enhanced by reading. You can also travel to different countries, different worlds, you know, back in time, forward in space. All of these are possible with books. And, you know, children have different requirements, different needs, different likes. So often you will find some children really like information books. And one of my grandsons had this obsession with trains from a very early age. And all of his books were about trains. And I have to say, I am not a fan of trains, but I mean, I had to learn all the different terms. And he would, if I missed something, he would go back. He said, but you didn't read that bit, because it was his passion. Another of my grandchildren has got a passion for the ocean and all the sea creatures, and will keep testing me. Do you know what this one is? And of course, I generally get it wrong. But it's this kind of conversations we have around books and stories and information. It's so important. So empathy is increased by reading. Well-being, as Dr. Rana said, children, particularly through the pandemic, have been under a lot of stress. But reading and that reassurance and that taking yourself to another place, really, for the time of the story, it helps their well-being. It helps them to calm down. Reading at bedtime definitely is a way to unwind at the end of the day. It's relaxing. You're sharing it with loved ones, so it's a great thing. And the other thing is, I didn't stop reading to my children when they learnt to read. I kept on reading to them. And what I would do then, I moved on to a chapter book, and I had different age children, obviously. So we would choose a book and I would read a chapter a night. But what I found myself doing, I was so engrossed in the story that once they'd all gone to sleep, I had to read the next chapter because I couldn't wait for the next day. So you really, really have this very close thing, discussing books, discussing, books are made into films. Which did you prefer? One of my daughters was very upset. I mean, a book she loved, she saw it I thought she would love it. And she said, but he doesn't look like he should. That's not how he should look. And she was 9 years old and she'd read this book. And I thought it was a TV program. I thought it was brilliant. But in her view, and I've never forgotten that actually we have our mind's eye. So we see things, words print images and emotions and feelings. It's magical what words can do to us. So we have a duty, all of us have a duty to the future generations to make sure they read for pleasure. So founding the festival came out of this desire to find other ways. So engagement with authors, we would have whole classrooms of particularly teenage boys would come and see an author, and the teachers would write back to the festival, 3 weeks later and said, my class of boys who never picked up a book are now on book 6 of this series. So we know that can sometimes be an impact. And also, as an avid reader, we want to sometimes understand what an author meant by this. And sometimes I've heard questions from audience members who know the book better than the author sometimes, and they've seen something different. So every book that's written is a relationship, a one-to-one relationship between the author and the reader. We complete it as readers, we complete that relationship. And my takeaway, say, for example, from Dr. Rana's book, would be different from your takeaway because we have a whole wealth of experience, of life experience. So the more that we can give children that chance, and it takes, 10, 15, 20 minutes a day. Are you saying you cannot afford 20 minutes to give your children a gift of a lifetime? Because it is a gift of a lifetime. I still read 2 books every day. I mean, every day. I read every day, but I read 2 books a week. I like fiction, I like non-fiction, I'm interested, and my eyes can't stop reading. If I see words, I'm reading it. And it's a very different experience from audio. Now, audio, I think there is a great advantage sometimes of audiobooks for children with a really good reader, but nothing replaces the experience of you reading to your children and then asking them, having questions, having that conversation about what is going on. So sorry to go on a bit, but as you can tell, I'm so passionate about making sure we don't say we're too busy to do that. I've been in important meetings, and actually one of my grandsons, particularly with Zoom, when they were doing online learning and they were here, sometimes they would come up and they'd have a book in front of me and people would say, and I say, I would then say to the grandchild, please wait, I've got 5 more minutes. And this child would then sit there quite impatiently waiting for my meeting to finish so that I could read the book. So it is a wonderful thing. And talking about the kind of books we need, there are more and more books out there on more and more subjects. And what I would say to anyone listening, if it's a children's book, pick it up, read it. Do you like it? Do you think, I'm not saying that educational books don't have their room, they do, but try and see, and then take your children to libraries. We've got wonderful libraries in the Emirates. We're being hosted by a library today, and go to the library with your children, make it a weekly visit, see what they like. It's not just about you, because your taste will be your taste, but their taste and each child's taste could be completely different. So give them the freedom. So, I grew up, my mother used to borrow 9 books a week. I mean, you can tell that she would borrow books. They had books at home. We went every Saturday to the library to borrow books. We had our own little card from when we were very little. And it's the freedom to choose, again, that's really important. Gifts were always books. Again, think about, gifting a book. And just coming back to lower income families, those children that are in a scheme like Professor Rana's or any of the other schemes that are running, if they can get their hands on books, reading for pleasure, there's a system, I think it's called Chore Start or Bright Start in the UK, where every child born gets a box of books when they're born and another box of books when they are 2. And so those may be the only books that they see. And then they can come along and they can meet other mothers and they can have the kind of instruction that Professor Rana was talking about to help them understand. Because if you've not had that experience, you might feel, I can't put on special voices, I can't pretend to be an animal, I can't. Of course you can. You know, you do what you want and make sure you enjoy it as much as your children.
Oh, that was amazing. Isabel, I have to ask also, is it too late? Now we're talking about the tremendous effects that is nothing like it when you are reading to a child or when you are growing this love of book and storytelling in a child's soul and body and being part of that whole mindset and whole world, which I call a secret garden, but or you call it Aladdin cave, sorry, Alibaba's cave. But is it too late? We're talking about changing mindsets. If an adult started reading, what
From
happens?
my viewpoint, I'll just say briefly, it's never too late. It's never too late to learn something new and to learn to enjoy it. You need to choose the right book. You need to see whether you want it as an audio book or you know, once you're an adult, you have to choose the senses that are better for you. And then joining, as you've done with the book clubs, discussing books together, agreeing to disagree about what you like and what you don't like, that's all part of the joy. So over to Professor Rana, because I'm sure you've got something to say on that.
Yes, please, Professor. Yes.
Yeah, no, I mean, everything you said, Isabelle, is amazing, and I applaud it and agree with it, and I want to add to it both evidence and other things that people can do who are listening and can convey the message to others. So first of all, I want to highlight the importance, what you mentioned, of the experience of fostering that love of reading. So I see I see this coming in 3 stages. So the first stage is for a child to learn how to read. So that's literacy, right? And there's a lot of programs working on that. I'm not going to talk about that. The second stage is after a child learns how to read, they need to enjoy the reading, to thrive in that. That second step, very, very few organizations work on. What they do is they jump to the third step, which is giving out books. But we know, and I'm sure you have seen this, that there may be houses and there may be children who have books, but they don't enjoy reading because to them it's boring, it's homework, or it's not associated with fun. So the second step to me is a very important stage that we call it illiteracy. And I think this is where we're all going to hit at some point when everybody is literate. And so We Love Reading does address that exactly. And as you said, it's all about having somebody who's a role model, who loves to read themselves, and this becomes contagious because children imitate. And then the magic happens. So what we always advocate, that it's not enough to give out books. You need to train these adults to read aloud. And then you don't need a lot of books, because if a child loves a book, oh my God, they will find the book anywhere. Everywhere. They will do anything to get it. And this is basic marketing. Just give out free books and the children don't want it, they're going to lie around and gather dust. Just focus on making them fall in love with reading, then you've motivated them. You've put the horse before the cart and it's ready to go, and then the books will come by themselves. So that I wanted to highlight that. I also wanted to highlight the other point, which is there's a famous The Rights of the Reader by Daniel Pennac, which says to read anywhere, to dip in, to not read, to skip, which is that joy of reading. And also to highlight what kinds of reading are those that really bring out the benefits of the reading. So there was a recent study that was done a few years ago at the New York University, where they took adults ages 18 and above, and they gave them for 3 minutes either not to read, or read nonfiction, or read pulp fiction, or literary fiction like Dickens or Tolstoy, or in Arabic, Taha Hussein or Manfaluti. And then they measured the empathy before and after. 3 minutes, and they found that only those Yeah, I mean, I have to give it away. Only those who read literary fiction, actually, their empathy increased because you're living in the shoes of the other person. So that importance of reading that kind of literature to children early as even the mother's pregnant, because as you said, Isabel, the child's brain and imagination can go beyond the level of reading because they're listening and imagining. And by the way, we have it in our culture also. When parents are reading Quran to the children, they're enlightening them, opening their imagination, and giving them vocabulary to think in more diverse and rich words. And lastly, to reach everybody, to reach the vulnerable communities, or the last mile, as people say, we believe We Love Reading is a kind of a solution because it's very simple. You just need somebody who can read a children's book. And even if they can't, because we were working with people in Uganda and Nigeria, and they said they can't even read. We said, that's okay. If they can take a picture book with a few lines of text and make up the story, the child doesn't know, but to them, there's a connection between that human interaction and a text on a book. And so they'll want to take the book and make up their own story, but you've done the connection. And so We Love Reading offers that so that we can reach every child, because I believe, it's a crime for a child to grow up not falling in love, to discover their inner potential and the world around them. And it's doable. And again, Isabel, I feel we play a lot of ping pong in what you said. It's that if these children grow up to fall in love with reading, you've solved all the problems, because they will grow up to be readers to their children and so on. And so there won't be any need for us. And a lot of the challenges we face today will go away, because these are empowered citizens as they grow up to become change makers because of the power they discover in themselves to solve their own problems.
Yes, it's also, I just wanted to add what is, I think, is a really important reason for reading for pleasure. So I learned to read, unsurprisingly, when I was quite little for myself. And two books I remember, actually, I was 7 or 8. I remember reading them and where I was, because the memory is so strong. One was The Secret Garden, and the other was Heidi. Now, both of those had strong characters who both changed. So the character in The Secret Garden was quite unlikable, but over the course of the journey and the impact of others on her, she changed to be the real heroine of the story. And she was orphaned in India. She travelled to live on the Yorkshire, forbidding Yorkshire moor, etc. So strong role models for both boys and girls are really important. And Heidi, I had never been to Switzerland, but I could see myself in the mountains helping look after the goats, living in this wonderful, little wooden shack. I can still feel the love I had of those stories, and I'm sure they taught me empathy, and they taught me to be able to imagine. So it increased my awareness and my visualization skills, because I can shut my eyes and I can be in that place. And that has stayed with me all my life, because I read books that were great stories, but they had great girls in them. And this was a long time ago. And that is really, really important, that girls see themselves. They see someone of their color. They see someone wearing glasses. They see someone with curly hair. They see someone in a wheelchair. And, that everyone is somehow or other represented, and that as parents we find books that help them think, well, I'm not alone. There's someone just like me, and look what they've done. And it sort of is a very subtle way, but it is so important to our children. And it's never too late to start reading, but if you want, as a parent, to be a really good role model, you've got to have books at home. You've got to spend time. You've got to have a basket by the door where you put your mobile phones in. And when you come and you say, this is a mobile free time, I do not need to check a message every minute. We all are victims of this thing that I've got here. Okay, we are victims of it because we keep checking. We're living in the moment. Your children's future is being taken away unless you really are strict with yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, I want to add to what you said about reading adults, that it's never too late. There's a famous quote by Esma Codell, which says, "There's nobody who doesn't like to read. They just haven't found the right book." It's like Friends. So just to try to read the first 20 pages of any book, and you don't like it, put it aside, go find another one. And also, I wanted to add to what you said about role models and reading about people who look like you, who dress like you, who live in cultures similar to like you. And that's a call to your question, Iman, about what kinds of books we need. We need books written by, we're speaking to the Arab community now, books written by Arab people, about Arab people. And actually, we owe it. We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to the next generation for them to read our stories in our own pens, in our own voices, rather than to read it from somebody else writes about us. Then we can't blame them. So this is also a call to writing. And it's a circle. The more you read as a community, the more writers will come out. And then the more material, and then the more reading. And so we call out to the readers to read more. Everybody read every night, 10 minutes to yourself, to the children around you in your community. Have a book with you everywhere you
Can
go.
I add
And
a
write.
point here?
Yes, please.
Yes, please. Because we are poor in Arabic countries with the teenager writers. They need their own style of books. We only find in the libraries big novels or short stories. These teenagers are the eaters. But if you find the right book to give them.
Samah, right? Samah Saeed?
I think that is a really, really good point. And certainly when I was growing up, there were no books for teenagers. We had children's books, and then we moved on to adult books, which were the classics. So it's quite difficult, even if you're an avid books, that teenagers love. And I think there is a gap, certainly in Arabic, for really authentic books for teenagers, for young adults, that address the challenges that they're facing in today's world. And I do think there is sometimes issues in many parts of the world about censorship. People are worried about that. We're all human beings, and we all have the same worries and fears. And I think all of us can remember when we were teenagers, those kind of worries and those kind of fears. And, books for teenagers need to address them honestly, and they need to also have great stories.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
Sorry?
There's a few. So just to give you some recommendations for really good teenager books that have been recently coming out. So Taghreed al-Najjar from Jordan.
Yes.
He has a beautiful series of children, teenager books. Sitt al-Kul, Khubbat Raghda, and many others one about her doll, how she discovered a doll that was taken away from her when her grandmother left Palestine, when Zionists took over her country. So that's a beautiful story. So there are a few coming out, but we need more. We can never have enough.
I agree. She writes beautifully, Taghreed. She's been to the festival many times, and she's an amazing inspiration for so many of us.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Isabella, Professor. I just wanted to let everyone know that we are opening now the part of Q&A. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments, kindly either raise your hand to participate, or you can write the question or the comment in the chat section, and I will be reading the question to our guests, whether it's addressed for Isabelle or for Professor Rana. So sorry to interrupt you. Have someone who's raising their hand. Okay, we have someone who's raising their hand, so if you can unmute, please, and participate, just ask a question. I hope that is possible.
Good morning.
Mornings.
And have a nice day. Today we have this session. I'm very proud of your experience for this, giving the chance for the children and to have this important time for them to read. What do you think of the school now closed with COVID-19 and the issue of that? How the habit of the our suggestion for the parents, they don't have the time to read for their children because they have some issues, maybe the time of working or either the issues that they surrounded them. Maybe they don't learn at all. You know, there is some people have issues or they don't know the English language or Arabic language, they are weak in this. So what do you think that we can make like a website for any volunteer, for the teacher or either librarian to make this, to like record their voice and with the story itself and let them have the chance to have this uh, touch or this happen. What do you think?
So I'll start by answering. So first of all, one important thing, and I think it was mentioned earlier, is that if you believe as a parent that reading to your children is important, you will find time. It's like food. You don't say, I don't have time to feed my child, or I don't have time to, if you believe this is fundamentally important for them, you will find time. We know that when we want something. So that's number one. So it's about how do I help parents realize the importance of this, of reading, because reading aloud becomes a placeholder. What we say for We Love Reading, it's a placeholder until school comes back to keep the child engaged and motivated. If you have children reading stories for fun, that's enough education when there's no school, because they will keep reading more and more and more. Now, when you say that parents may not know how to read, again, we're talking about reading in your native tongue. That's enough to keep you engaged until the right time comes when you can go back to school. And even if it's just making up a story from a book. However, in We Love Reading, what we say is you can have one person in the neighborhood reading aloud to the children, gathering them and reading aloud if the parents can't. And even now, because of COVID, we've put online. Well, we're against doing digital, but if this is the only alternative, it's there. There's plenty of YouTube channel where we have our volunteers reading aloud stories. And so a child can listen to that, a read aloud story, and look at the pictures at the same time. So that's available as well. But again, we always emphasize it's about the human interaction. It's about the parent realizing the importance of reading aloud to their children and finding the time.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for your question. Thank you, Professor Rana, for the amazing answer. I don't know if Isabelle, you want to add anything to that question.
I totally agree with Professor Rana about we wouldn't say to our children, oh, it's okay, don't brush your teeth today because we don't have time. Don't have a shower because we don't have time. Reading is as essential to me as brushing my teeth, and my children and grandchildren brushing their teeth. So it's not nice to have, it is essential. And that's the mindset that parents need to be in. You want the best for your children. You want them to do well at school. You want them to do well at university. You want them to do well in their careers. So don't miss out this. There's nothing more important than this, and particularly with young children, but it's never too late. If you've got teenage children, and if you don't read for pleasure or you have a thing, just find something that you can share that's simple, that you pick it up and you think, actually, I can read this. And don't be frightened of putting on silly voices or, saying, oh, I can't read that word. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The most important thing is to do it. You don't achieve getting to the top of Mount Everest in day one. It's day by day by day. And then you will look back and think, my goodness, look now how much I can read and how much I enjoy reading.
And actually, just want to add to what Isabelle said. We Love Reading has an online training portal for the adults. It's a very simple, even if you don't have a large bandwidth, you do it at your own pace. You stop whenever you want. It's only 4 hours, and you do it once, and that's it. It trains you how to read aloud, how to change your voice, how to choose a good book, and so parents can do that, and then they can, embark on their journey of fun with their children.
Yeah, there's a very good question that's come in from Ahmed Izzedine Shilbak. He said, yes. What is the impact of reading simultaneously Arabic and English stories to children's linguistic capability, age range 0 to 6? Right. I'm a great believer that children need to be very, very grounded in their mother tongue, whatever their mother tongue is, and that should be the language you focus on. We know that everyone will pick up English. I wouldn't be worried about English. It's like a virus. It's like a pandemic of English, and it is destroying the ability for children to speak their mother tongue if their mother tongue's Arabic. So I would focus very much on reading in Arabic to them, if that's your mother tongue, or your you know, the tongue of your country where you're from.
Isabel, please, you are muted. If you can just check your mic, please. Yes.
Sorry. So I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I must have touched it by mistake. So what I'm saying is, you heard the question from Professor, Ahmed, I think, Shabak. He's asking about, what about reading in both languages? I do believe it's better to focus on one language and build on that, build on the vocabulary, build on the enjoyment. But then, you know, maybe there's someone in your household who's going to be reading to them in English. It could be a helper, it could be another family member. That's fine, but you need to really focus on mother tongue being as strong as possible, particularly in the early years.
Professor Rana, do you have, it's an amazing question, Ahmed. Professor Rana, do you have any addition to that question?
I couldn't agree more with what Isabelle said. The mother language is so important. We know that it has to, because it's all about the emotions and the emotional progress and development of the brain that has to be connected with the mother tongue. And it makes it easier because you're not learning another language. So thank you very much, Isabelle, for explaining that with such passion.
Thank you.
I have to agree with both of you ladies. If you allow me to share my own experience, I mean, I went to an Arabic school, Arabic system school, and we taught English, but not as strong. And I've been reading Arabic all my life, but then it grew up. I went to a university, American university, and then I started working on my English. I finished my master's. I'm teaching now in an American university in the US, in Western Kentucky. So yes, I totally agree. Now, when you have the strong basic of your own language, then you're really fine and you can't catch up.
Yeah, and I just want to add, that's how you unlock your creativity and your imagination, because it comes from that inner place, and it helps boost your identity so that you're proud of where you come from and where you are, and it allows you to unlock your history, because you can read with pleasure and with ease all the documents and the historical things about your own country and culture.
Yes, and don't ever worry about English. English, whatever age you are, you will pick it up, because there is so much around us, you know, distractions in English. Focus on, if your mother tongue is Arabic or another language, focus on that in the early years, and try and keep that as to make sure your children have every advantage to understand so many abstract things that if they do not get it in their mother tongue, they will never be able to put it into another language. You know, linguistics are a very strange part of our brain. And of course, children can learn more than one language, but do not detract from their mother tongue ever. It is a really key part of a child's development.
There's a very nice question from Hamda Saleh Ahmed, and she's asking, what's the best kind of book kids love? That's a very interesting question.
101. I mean, that's what I'm saying about have us, you know, if you are going to go out and buy your child books or your children books, take them with you, and you select books, put a pile there and say, which ones do you like? You know, or go to the library and explore what they've got on their shelves, because children definitely will be attracted by different types of books, and the more experience they have of being read to, they will then develop quite strong tastes, and they know what they like, they know what is you know, but I always actually I love reading children's books, so before I buy something for my grandchildren, I'll read it, and if I enjoy it, then I know I'm going to enjoy reading it to them. And, you know, they will have the other books about trains and oceans and dinosaurs and what else, which I may not enjoy as much, but I learn a lot actually just by reading with them.
Professor Rana.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What Isabel said about allowing, exposing our children to multiple genres of books and allowing them to make the choice, which helps them become their own independent self, that they have an opinion and respecting that opinion, that this is the book they love and this is what they want to read or be read to them. So exposing them, empowering them to choose. And using, as again, as was mentioned earlier, gifting books. I mean, we gift chocolate, we gift money, we gift, other things. Nobody thinks of, I want to give a set of books if somebody had a baby, or a set of books because somebody graduated, or a set of books for any occasion. So again, fostering that kind of habit is important. And the last thing is, try to read. Like I said, 20 pages. You don't like it, that's okay. Go pick another book, and so on.
Ida Rashid Harib al-Dhahri has sent a question. Do I need to correct each word while my child reads? Now, I would say no. I would just say, just have a very positive, just saying, wow, that was really, really good. You read it amazing. And then maybe, if it's not a long story, read it again and just stop every so often and say, yes, I've remembered that word. So you almost, you mirror their behavior so they don't feel intimidated by not knowing a word or reading the wrong word. And make sure that you also spend time looking at the pictures and thinking what the pictures are telling us. So I hope that's helpful, but I would never, I'm very, very concerned about reading being learning and discipline and all of those things. And if that's the child's experience, you're only hearing books that they're reading from school. You need to have books that you're reading with them outside of that to balance because learning to read is a chore. It's not as enjoyable, let me tell you. It's a chore. It's like learning to swim. You know, the joy is when you can swim, but you've got to get there, and you have to overcome that and keep it sweet. So that child always has as much enjoyment from you reading, because remember that when you're reading to a child, the child just has 100% enjoyment. They're not having to struggle to decipher the words. They're looking at the words, but they're also looking at the pictures and the illustrations. And that experience is such a nurturing, and you are saying to them by having them on your knee and putting your arms around them, I love you and I love books. And it's all in one little hug.
Absolutely. And actually, to follow up on what you said, and one of the questions which says parents and teachers sometimes insist on the moral, ethical, clear message of the book, what to say to them. So to me, this is two things. When we train how to read aloud, first we say you don't explain the words. So if there's a new term, you don't say what it is. You want the child to embark on a journey of discovery, of playing the word in his mind or her mind, trying to associate it with the picture or from the context, and maybe they won't guess it, or they'll guess it wrong. And then that's the curiosity path as their neurons develop to keep guessing and trying. And that ambiguity is what develops their critical skills. So read as it is. And that respects also the writer, the author. When they chose that word, they had a reason. And that teaches the child to respect that. And it teaches respecting the child, not saying you will need to explain every word to the child. Now, the second part, which is, does the reading have to have a moral or ethical clear message? No. Again, that's back to storytelling. The story has to be fun, entertaining, and then the moral or the ethic will be very unconscious, indirect, and the child will learn it. For example, that's how we read stories. So some of the parents came to us and said, but you need, this is not ethical. For example, there was a story about a child who grows up and she doesn't like her aunt to kiss her. You know how we have in Arab, you kiss on both cheeks, and she'd wipe it off and she doesn't want it. And then one parent said, but this does not teach respect. I said, no, this is real. This happens. You can't deny the experience of the child. It's then you resolve it. So the story resolved where it was the aunt, the only one who came and visited her niece when she had some kind of disease and played with her chest. So it was resolved in the end. So the child does not like to see or hear the story of a perfect child, because that reminds them of their weaknesses or their, they're not achieving. They want to hear the child who's like them, who runs away and so on. And that's how they fall in love with reading. And that's why they want to see what happened to that kid, because that child looks just like them and acts just like them. So don't worry. I tell parents, if the child falls in love with reading, eventually they'll read the good things and they'll come to those lessons. First, let them fall in love with reading.
Yeah. And it's actually, there's nothing worse than a book that's full of moral statements. You know, you must always be good. You must never do this. You must never do that. Because we're human beings. We all do that. We've all made mistakes. As we grow, we learn. So it's very important for children to see naughty children. And often it will be naughty animals who don't do what they're told, or someone who's greedy and, you know, they eat all the things, or they won't share their toys. But it's done in a very subtle way that actually children think, yes, well, I'm a bit like that, aren't I? And at the end, it's always children's stories, always not teenage stories, but children's stories up to the age of 11, always have a positive ending. But you can also read, I can remember some books about death, you know, when someone beloved passes away, and you know, it's a very traumatic experience. So there are some lovely children's books that deal with, say, loss of a beloved pet, which is a little bit more easier, but then they relate then to that through storybooks. So you know, there are difficult, going to hospital, for example, or being in hospital, or being ill, you know, these are all quite frightening experiences for children. And there are lots of books around these kind of topics that are still fun to read, still interesting, and help children feel more comfortable with some of those things. But a book that is just preaching, you know, don't do this, don't do that, you should do this, no one is going to enjoy it, neither the parent nor the child.
And there's another question here talking about, my children insist on reading in English, their academic educational language, rather than Arabic, their mother cultural tongue, which I like to improve. I believe to resolve this, the parent has to love reading in Arabic, because it's contagious. Just like a parent loves to dress up and the child will imitate, if you really love the Arabic language and love to read in it, you'll be sharing, like say, oh, I read this, I want to share it with you. You're so excited. Your children, because they want your attention, will sit with you and listen. So it's for you to foster that love of reading. And maybe if at school they're only learning English, you could do as a parent volunteer, go to the school, read in Arabic, encourage reading in their native tongue as well.
And share. So that is quite a common, I think, challenge in the Emirates, certainly, that children are coming home, they want to read in English rather than Arabic for many reasons. One is that a lot of their lessons at school will be in English, so they're not getting as much Arabic, but also it's the selection of books that they may be presented with. So what you can do is balance that, have a balance. So by all means, you know, don't say to them, I'm not going to read to you in English, because I can guarantee you they will want to read in English more. So you say, great, let's read that in English. And now I need to read this in Arabic. So you balance it out and you make sure that they have enough good stories in both languages. And, you know, it is a very common challenge at the moment that children are gravitating very strongly towards the English language. And it's a great shame, because Arabic is one of the most richest, beautiful languages in the world. And we need young people to use it, not for it to become just on the shelf language.
And that's why you should start early, even when you're pregnant. Read in Arabic.
Yeah.
And that way, even if they go to the school and they're exposed to English, it harks back to that feeling of comfort and security growing up being read to in Arabic.
There's another question by Amna Al-Kabi. And the reading time with my kids, I have to read for him, or we have to let him to read alone? And I hear him to correct wrong words. We answered that question, but if Professor Rana or Isabel wants to add anything to that, as we're approaching almost the end of our session. But do you want to add anything to that question?
Well, I mean, briefly, for her to read to him. It's not about the child, even if the child can read, it's the experience. So to cuddle and to sit in bed before they sleep, or if they're waiting for at the doctor's clinic or somewhere, always have a book and to cuddle and read. It's about that experience, and not, read to me. But if a child wants to read to his parent, that's fine. But it's about the experience.
Isabelle, do you want to, as we reach the end of our session, unfortunately today, and this session was very generous, and you shared a lot. It's contagious. You shared all of your passion to Professor Rana or Isabelle. Do you like to end this session with any final thoughts or words for whoever is
Yes, I'd
watching
like
this?
to just read out a quotation from H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, because I think this is such a beautiful, the way it sums up the power of words. So it's in English, apologies. We all have our time machines, don't we? Those that take us back are memories, and those that carry us forward are dreams. Now, that's so beautiful. I keep reading it and thinking, what a beautiful sentiment. And when you're reading as an adult fiction, and particularly literary fiction, what you're saying, I stop and I reread pages and I reread parts, and I can go back to the same book time and again, because every time I go back, it feeds my soul and I take something different from it. So it's really important to make, all of us, to make time in our daily lives to read every day. Read it, pick up anything and read it. Not on a phone, not on a laptop. Pick up a book somewhere, and it can be anything. And as Professor Rana said, read 20 pages. If you don't like it, at least you've read 20 pages. But also say to yourself, what didn't I like about it? Because it's really good to always, you know, put it down and say, well, I don't like that kind of book. And the more you read, the more you develop your reading taste, but also you develop the confidence to read anything. You know, I can read virtually anything. I might not always understand it, but I can read it. I can read very fast if I need to. So I can skim read. There are times when we need to skim read. But I also, if I'm reading something I love, like literary fiction, I go much slower, and I relish the pictures that are painted in my brain. So that's what I'd like to end on. And thank you, Iman, for being an amazing host. Thank you to my fellow speaker, Professor Rana, and thank you to the wonderful audience who've been here and who've really been active with all their comments and chats and queries throughout it all.
I'd like to say, thank you. I'd like to say a word, remind everybody the first word in the Quran was iqra, read. And it's not read meaning to just decode. It's much deeper. It's the reading with comprehension, the reading with feeling, the reading that transforms you to become more than you can imagine. That's the kind of reading that we should all embrace and practice and engage with and transfer to others. So yeah, thank you very much for everybody and all the questions. I've learned a lot, and I've enjoyed the conversation very much, and I look forward to all of us working together. And again, read. We can keep saying it. It's never enough. And I encourage you to spread the program We Love Reading so that we can reach everybody, whoever they are, with a simple method of just how to read aloud to your child wherever you are.
Personally, I am enjoying We Love Reading as after the session. Professor, sorry for keeping you up late as such late, really after midnight time. We're really lucky to have you today and experience this passion for reading. Isabelle, thank you so much for your sweet, informative talk. Thank you personally for changing my life. Reading and books has saved my life a lot. And I think we can share that at many levels, where with child or teenagers or later on. Thank you so much, Professor Rana. Thank you so much, Isabelle. Thank you so much, Department of Culture and Tourism in Abu Dhabi and Abu Dhabi Libraries. Happy Women's Day for all the women out there and for the all supporting men. Thank you so much for everyone who asked questions, who shared their experiences, and thank you for listening to us and watching this informative session, which is recorded and will be uploaded later on. So keep following us. Thank you so much and have a rest of
Bye-bye,
the day.
everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.